we finish at the end of the year with, do we have to, are we going to blow through the tax cap? What kind of increases? Because, so far we've made a huge deal out of the parents and the students, but we have a lot of constituents that aren't either of those that we need to deal with. We need to make sure they understand, what this might do to their taxes, how we're going to do it now, so they understand that we're sort of taking it out of our savings account if we do it. But beyond that, it's a budget issue. So tonight we're going to spend most of the time hopefully going through the financials. Thursday, I've asked Laura and Brian and Caroline to take that list of concerns and comments and questions that we submitted. I don't know, seems like it could be 2 years ago. But we submitted way back, and go through those and be able to send them out Thursday with sort of the answers. This is already, we believe we've already covered this or whatever, so that at our next board meeting, we can review that list before we move on to, if we move on to making a decision on a model, and or, because remote is still a model too. All right. So go ahead, John, you're muted. I only knew that, John, because I'm watching you now with all those switching of faces and stuff.
You missed one. So I'd also like to understand, if we get into one of the more aggressive phases where there's a high cost, and we've got to dial it back, what does that mean? Because we don't go automatically back to a pro rate of a lower number. We may have to keep people around at the higher number, perhaps. I just need to understand what this exactly means.
Yeah, no, John, I agree with you. I mean, one of the things we'll need to look at is, as we move forward, I mean, what are the most critical resources, that need to stick around versus the ones that maybe after 6 months we're comfortable that they don't need that help anymore, or that guidance.
Yeah.
But yeah, no,
it's like if you have to hire people and they're on for 3 or 4 weeks and you've got to pull that phase. Yep. What do you do about those people, and how do you get them back again when you want to go back, or do we think we won't be going back, all that kind of stuff, just to
and we need to look at decision date, like whatever model we decide for November 1st, our target date here. What's the next one? Are we going to try to do it by Christmas? Are we going to try to do it by, end of year?
Yep.
And what? I mean, are we thinking we'll go sort of halfway to something all the way? But you're right. I mean, and that's why I was hoping we could get that list, look through that, and then really be able to spend a lot of time with the recommendations moving forward. Not that
we also have to take into account what's feasible. Yep. That's a big thing.
Yep. Well, and that's why I asked Laura, Brian, and Caroline, or Brian and Laura primarily tonight, is tell me about the financials. It's not going to be November 1st and we suddenly hire 15 people. There might be 3, 4 coming the last week of October. We get 2 more mid-November. What is that, feasibly look like? Then if we have to take the next step, what does it look like? And if we had to trim one of those steps back, how could we do that if we can do it? And then, the last thing is, and I don't think I've heard this repeated or sort of reputed, is can we ever, as long as social distancing is a thing, can we ever truly get back to everybody in school? I mean, I keep hearing the answer is no. You know, the high school cannot support 5 day a week, everybody in. I don't know, but we need to know, because then that becomes a whole different discussion. You know, if as long as social distancing is in place, if we can't bring everybody back, then we're going to have this hybrid model for as long as this pandemic lasts, I guess. So anyway, so why don't we get into the finances? If you hear anything that sounds like a baseball game, I may be sorry.
Right.
Anyway, I'll take it, Laura.
So good evening, Millbrook. This is our 7th Board of Education work session, and this is part 3 of our hybrid discussion. And yes, we have been wondering about and thinking about and discussing who we need and the impact it has on our budget. So in collaboration, Brian, this is a collaboration of administration, and we've put it into a form to sort of show the board our needs like we did last time. Here are our needs, and here's going to be the financial impact. So Brian, do you want to start with your table, with your template?
Sure, I could do that. Good evening, everybody. Are you able to see my screen?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So where we are here is, as Laura shared, we've tried to capture what our needs are. You're going to see that I have tabs down here as previously presented, and then we were also encouraged, at one point last board meeting, I believe it was on Thursday, it was said, listen, we shared that we wanted to be able to be in a position to have increased monitoring because it may be true that we have to have people in the hallways to make sure that there are only 2 kids in the bathroom at once. We're going to want to have monitoring in the hallways in any case. But if it were true that we didn't feel as though we needed that increased staffing, what might it look like? So this first tab here is all the scenarios, as I orient you to the spreadsheet. All of our scenarios are in row 1. This spreadsheet is as we previously presented. Then the next spreadsheet that I'll share with you is pretty much the same spreadsheet, just with some slightly reduced staffing. Basically what that looks like is that it's 1 fewer monitor in each building. So the as previously presented tab, that should look somewhat familiar in terms of positions that were requested and shared that we may need. So you won't recognize the dollar amounts as much in here as for an example, $909,006. That did say $956,000 at one point. We realized that there was one of our monitors that we were requesting to be able to have additional staff about. We already had them budgeted, so that didn't require any additional money, so we did back them out. So as you go through, and again, I'm just going to continue to orient you to this spreadsheet. Elm Drive needs are in lines 3 through 7. Alden Place needs are through 9 through 13. Middle school 15 to 18, and high school is 20 to 23. The part that after we get into the detail, it's going to be of particular interest to you is we talked about the total annualized cost last time. That was a number that you'll remember in the slideshow was in parentheses. Keep in mind, this is just personnel. This doesn't talk about transportation needs, and it also doesn't talk about the cost of any infrastructure work that needs to happen at Elm Drive. Right now, Elliot's still in the process of determining what the infrastructure needs are, working with a vendor, and we will have that infrastructure update for you on Thursday. So this is strictly a staffing presentation.
Hey, Brian, when the cost per employee, that's a fully burdened cost? Like
Yes,
benefits, everything?
it is.
Okay.
It is. Yep. Not just salary, it's salary and benefits.
Now, is there an assumption that these folks are temporary? I mean, in other words, they're not like retirement. We're not going to have to do that, or what's the assumption on, whether they're like, what is, if they're temporary employees, which, I mean, I doubt we can sustain this forever. What does that change this at all?
Yeah, so no, it doesn't change anything. There's just, so Cheryl Sprague has been working pretty hard with civil service to make some determinations about what we would need to do. And basically the bottom line is for aides and monitors, we would be in a spot where Cheryl's determined that we're able to create a temporary position that we would hire. Teaching, so then you go into typist monitors, and that's a competitive position. And because it's a competitive position in civil service, you would actually have to appoint and then end up accessing. But the other positions in our COVID world, civil service has shared that we can appoint on a temporary basis.
Okay.
Can I ask?
That gets to John. Yeah, John, go ahead.
Can I ask, is it all full-time positions?
These are all slated as full-time positions, yes.
So we've got it, so you got the cost of all the benefits.
That's exactly right. We
Mhm.
wouldn't be able to chop it up such that we did like a 0.49 and a 0.49. We wouldn't be able to do that. We can't escape the requirement to provide benefits.
And, okay. Let me just ask another question. Could we do, I don't know what, let me just make a number, 6 hours a day times 4, not Wednesdays, for at least the hybrid where it's AABB? Or do we have to have people on a Wednesday?
So you're asking, can we do basically just an 80% position?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Or
we'd have to
for-
look into that so going back to, that's going to end up being a civil service question that we'll have to ask, because it may be true. So as an example, 5.8 positions equals 4 positions. And then are we able to do that? And the answer may indeed be yes. But it may also be true that it would be either even harder to get people to take a job if it's not a full-time position. The good news for everybody is that the benefit structure would still be there at an 80% position. So that would be good news for people who would want to take a job. But that's definitely one thing out there that we can consider for reducing cost, and more research would be required.
Caroline went last week. We still have special education on Wednesday, so we may not need the full staff, but we will need some.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, so the things that'll be of most interest here in terms of summary would be the not even necessarily the annualized cost, but the total monthly cost. And when we look at the total monthly cost, and I'm going to look at line 30 with you, that's important because that includes our custodians that we're anticipating needing. The important piece about that is, depending on the model that we're in, and when I say model, I'm talking about hybrid model, we may be able to, not maybe, but we can do better financial modeling. So you'll see that I have a third tab called data. And after I go through these spreadsheets, I'm going to share with you a spreadsheet that I created for our conversation, where we can do some financial modeling about the impact on our budget based on what's chosen and how many months we're in within that model. So more to follow on that, but you'll see in line 30 that we have a monthly cost for each of our scenarios. As I switch to the second tab, it's the exact same spreadsheet except for reduced staffing. And what reduced staffing is going to look like in this case is simply a monitor reduction in each of our buildings. We were trying to think about exactly the staffing that we would need, and of course it's impossible to get the exact staffing that we need, and we don't even know what's coming our way. But we wanted to be able to enter into this just diligently and purposefully, where we didn't want to get rid of all of our monitors that we were thinking about in a reduced staffing pattern. Just because we're not going to be monitoring the hallways, it might end up being true that it will be true, frankly, that class coverages are going to be very challenging. So we've left one monitor in on top of the person who would be monitoring the isolation room. So that you see even in this reduced staffing paradigm.
Brian, even on the minimal AARB, we still need to hire 17 people pretty much by November 2nd to be optimal, correct?
By October 2nd to be optimal, we're saying
November 2nd.
By November 2nd, I'm sorry, I'm saying 5, 8, 12, 13, 17, yes.
Right. And the other program, other map was 22, I believe.
Yes.
So what do you think is actually feasible? I mean, do we really think we could get 17 people between now and November 2nd?
Well, Cheryl's already advertised. She's put that out, or it's just about ready to go out. I'm not, which one is it?
So those postings are out already. The only thing that we're waiting on is the typist monitor, because I have to get the list from the county. So that one will take a little longer, but that's a shorter amount and there'll be people on the list. So, and so of course we're going with the, you gave that conceptual permission for the smaller numbers. So it might not be too bad for this first round. It's going to be when we have to have, the increased amount of aides where it might become more difficult.
Now, can these be not temporary, 10-month employees?
They are 10-month. Yep.
They all are?
Mm-hmm.
With the
Yeah.
exception of the 2 custodians.
Right. Except yeah. But everybody's 10-month. And we do have permission to make them temporary, like Brian mentioned, through June.
So really, we're talking about hiring 19 plus, really, we've got 3, I don't know how you're doing, Mike, but you got 3 openings already in maintenance. And then you're talking 2 more. So we're talking 22 people hired in the next 4 weeks.
So Mike has his, the 3, he gave me paperwork today for the custodian positions that were open. And so now he has to fill these other 2.
Right. Yeah, no, my point was we're actually talking about 22 employees that we've got to, for it to be optimal, or even for it to be at its max, like the monthly going rate, we'd have to hire 22 people and have them start by November 2nd.
Mm-hmm.
I believe, yeah.
And do we have any thoughts about what that really might be? I mean, this really gets into, like, do we think we could find 7 people a month? Do we think we could find 18 a month? I mean, and I know they're all different sort of categories or different job categories, but it would say, especially as we get into some of the other models, where I didn't even add up the number of employees, but I think we were almost to 30 before, or maybe it was over 30. I mean, how long do we think it would take us? Because a lot of this is going to go into the decisions about, when we could go from our entry model into the next model.
So I'll have a better idea next week of the responses that I get we have to give them at least 5 days to respond. So we'll have a better idea for the postings that I've put out there, what we're getting in. I did post it in a lot of different places, so hoping that we reach more people this way. But I'll just have a better answer next week.
So Laura, did you have a chance to talk with other superintendents, and what had, have they given you any background on, geez, we tried to hire two new custodians and they're just, they're like hen's teeth, or, I mean, did you get any of that sort of feedback?
Yeah, the hiring is a struggle. Substitutes are going to be a struggle. Health aides are going to be a struggle. I think like what Cheryl said, we just are going to cast the net and see if there's a response, because that will inform, our hybrid, or maybe it's a hybrid within a hybrid, to see who's available and willing to work.
What type of experience does, say, a monitor need? I mean, is it something that we can kind of canvas just our local area instead of putting it in the journal and whatever other listings we would put it in? I mean, we might have local families that are willing to be monitors. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel that typically that's who our monitors end up being. I mean, would you agree, Brian? I feel like it's usually people from our community who are filling our monitor positions and probably even our teacher aide positions.
Yeah, but that's a good idea, Chris. We could maybe send out a school messenger posting to our families, and see who may be interested.
I was also thinking, I know my cousin is a social worker across the river, and she said that like some schools there are unfortunately having layoffs. And I think I read on one of those newsletters that we get that, certain schools have unfortunately laid off teachers and then hired them back as substitutes. So, I'm sure every school is probably scrambling for it, but, there could be, some teachers out there that unfortunately have lost their job that might be able to substitute.
Yeah, we know that some BOCES have laid off a number of people, and then a number of Catholic schools have closed as well. So they may be candidates.
Yeah.
It would seem like, New York State unemployment, I think, is still just around 10%. I mean, you would think there would be, at least for, I mean, it's a teaching assistant, you have to have a certificate, right, to do that?
Right.
So, I mean, that I think would be harder to just, find somebody that's really looking to work. But you would think that we would be able to find some folks and sort of help in their situation, which helps ours.
And some of our substitutes might be some of those people, but then of course that depletes our sub pool.
Well, I mean, I still, if we have all these teacher aides, and I don't know how this, I mean, the fact that that every teacher that's teaching other than AABB is going to be teaching in one room with half of their students in a second room, so we need a teacher's aide. I don't know how much we could use the teacher's aides as substitutes, pull a monitor in for a day to sort of just, make sure the class doesn't get out of hand. It's different if if the teacher's aide goes down, or there's the teacher goes down from, just being sick.
Harry, you're right, and that shuffling happens even in everyday world of coverage in an office. So it's going to happen even more. We're going to end up shuffling monitors and teacher aides, and just making sure that classes are covered and kids have appropriate supervision in front of them. But you're right, we're gonna be playing that game.
Mm-hmm.
So if we make some sort of assumptions, about the speed at which we can hire, have you gone through each one of these and say, for a full year, and maybe that's the annualized cost for the full year, let's say we go through, we're in February and we're still in the middle of social distancing and all this other good stuff. Have you gone through and looked at what that would do? And I know it's almost impossible. We don't know if Cuomo's going to cut our aid, but we need to, as I said before, we need to start letting people know that, it's all these plans are going to be, are great. Let's get the kids back in. But for us to do it, it's going to be an impact on all the taxpayers in the district. So we need to start to think about, if we went with column G in this one, that would lead us to probably, we could make the tax cap, or we couldn't. We'd miss it by 10 to 20%. So we start to look at, not just the impact on this year, because if we can't find the money in this, in our quote unquote savings account, and we can't raise any additional revenue. So if we can't afford it, then either we cut some of this stuff, we cut something else, and then, to pay for this.
Yeah.
But we need to start to understand longer term, can we afford to do anything, say, beyond, I don't know, the cheapest one here is what, column C. Could we afford to do anything beyond column C? Those are the things we got to really start to work on. I don't think they have to be done before we go, we make a decision. But if we can't even afford, say, column C, I'm not sure what we're talking about.
Yeah. So the way the tax cap calculation works, it had with some few exceptions in the calculation, it has, believe it or not, little to do with the previous year. I mean, pilots are a different exception. You have to back that out. But really, it's all about what you're rolling over into the new year. So it has very little to do with actually what you spend. But you'll see here, in this tab, this data tab, what I did was I created a spreadsheet here that will help with some financial modeling. So as an example, and I am going to do it I'm going to enter some, just for the sake of doing some modeling here. I'm not going to talk about actual scenarios, but let's just say scenario one, whatever scenario one was, and it actually happened to be the AABB model. So let's say we determined that we needed to be there for 3 months. And then we were going to be in scenario 3 for the remainder of the year, which would be another 5 months. What I've done here is this will tabulate the exact amount that it will cost us. It will talk about what the budget increase will be on next year, only attributable to this staffing increase. And it will also talk about what the levy increase was, again, only attributable to this staffing increase. So in this example where I just punched numbers in, if we needed to be, and it was determined that we needed to be in scenario 1 for 3 months, and then in scenario 3 for 5 months, we would be talking about an additional $984,000 that wasn't budgeted. We'd be talking about an increase. Now, if we wanted to take this staffing pattern and move it into next year, we would be talking about a budget increase of 3.18%, and we'd be talking about a levy increase of 3.91%. Now, that didn't completely answer your question, Perry, about cap piercing, because we can't do a calculation, but we would be hard pressed to imagine, unless it were true that they were going to take all of our building aid away, in which case we would have a higher exclusion. We would be hard pressed to imagine that we would have a levy increase anywhere near 3.91%. So if we want to think about that, we know that the tax levy limit is not 2%, but if just for the sake of approximating, we want to think about it in 2%, in terms of 2%, we're already 2% over our tax levy in possibilities.
So Brian, let me make sure I understand it. So this is talking basically if we did, November to February with scenario 1, and then we went March through June scenario 2, that would be a $984,000 increase. Like that's additional spending of 985.
That's correct, and that's in this year's money. That doesn't include any salary increases for next year. But yes, what you just said is correct.
What I was getting to was, so then if we look at next year's budget, unless we're going to take like scenario 3 and back it down to scenario 1 and, in the middle of next year's school, we're really, what we should be looking at here is 12 months times 12 months times 143 or 144 to look at.
Yep, that's the annual. That would be the annualized. We couldn't even just use the annualized cost here.
Right. No, Can you jump back to that other one though?
Yep.
So, but that's what I'm saying. This 3.91 and the 3.18, that doesn't have the full, like a full year of scenario 3 in it.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah. So there we would have to, and that would be just rolling over the exact scenario. So to your point, if you're saying that we wanted to land in scenario 3, then it doesn't matter what's here, and this should be 10 months of, and we're looking at a $1.4 million increase.
Yeah.
Yes.
We're talking about a levy.
Can I ask?
Yeah, John.
Can I ask, are there any reserves that are allowed to we're allowed to take out of that to fund this kind of thing? Or there are no reserves you can do that with?
Yes, so there are, and there's increased flexibility with reserves, but as you know, with reserves, 1-year costs are doable. Anything else that you wouldn't necessarily want to budget in the use of reserves for multi-year costs, because then eventually the reserves are going to be depleted and we won't be able to afford it.
I understand that. But I look at this as that, we put in some money this past few years into reserves that, you never plan on having that kind of money either. So I'm not saying deplete anything, but it's just, I don't know. It may be we have to think about part of this comes from some reserve someplace, and part of it comes from just normal budgeting and tax paying.
Well, I think this year it all has to come out of something like reserves, but next year, right, John?
Yeah.
I mean, we got to figure out. So would we use more of our reserves to reduce the levy? But then again, this all comes down to the roll of the dice as to how long this thing lasts.
Yeah. Because this happened to districts some years back, and they started dipping into, their unreserved fund balance, and people survived. So.
Oh yeah.
If something's going to go on for 4 years, that's going to be a major problem. But a year or two, like in other words, plan for a couple of years, perhaps. A bad time for a couple of years financially.
I agree with you. I mean, we have to sort of figure. It's like the sustainability thing. We got to figure out how to survive this.
Yeah. So John, to your point, what you're sharing is this year we have $857,000 as an example in an insurance reserve fund. Perhaps next year that's going to end up going into the assigned fund balance to reduce the levy. or a portion of that. And yes, the board would be at its liberty to figure, and maybe you decide we're not going to be reserving for our tax cert reserves anymore, as an example, or whatever that combination is, and we would be able to work through that. But yeah, that would be true. But the only thing that we can't forget is, again, so let's say we were to take $400,000 from the insurance reserve and say we're going to use that to offset the levy. That may end up being a smart choice, but the next year that you do that, you got to find the $400,000 or cut your budget in the ensuing year. But yes, you're smart.
Or put some back into that, and have a plan to try to backfill it over some years, not immediately.
Yes.
But the other thing too, another idea is when we had the mold problem, there was that crazy fund that we decided to tap. Then the insurance covered most of it that we didn't have to tap, and that's a kind of those are more one-shotters. And this kind of a pandemic is kind of a one-shotter kind of thing too, the way I'm looking at it. So any comment about that large amount of money?
Yeah, you read my mind. I was scrolling down here, or I read yours, one of the two, and you're talking about that our retiree health insurance are within our accrued liabilities, and that will also be an option for the board to be able to use. Maybe you say we can no longer afford to hold 1 full year of retiree health insurance in our accrued liability, and that's not something that's wise any longer to do. So there will be options, but would you please understand, I guess I want to share, while there are options, our fiscal health will certainly be diminished, and that will have an impact on us when we're going out for ratings. If we're going out for capital projects, which we will, we won't get necessarily that AA2 rating that we have had in the past in order to be able to get the best bond rating possible. But that may be a trade-off that the board would have to decide on.
Yeah, here again, it'd be nice to know what's the next step down. What does that translate to typically a fiscal, from a fiscal point of view? How much extra does a drop in a rating cost you?
Yeah, I mean, it's, and this is why I really think this is extremely important for all of our board members to understand. Not just the, what model we want to go to, but let's say it's the cheapest, it's the scenario 1. Maybe we can't, even though we're ready, maybe we can't go back January 2nd or January 1st to this, or whatever the first day of January is. Maybe we can't afford to, using this model, maybe we can't do 3 months of scenario 1. We've got to look at 5 months of scenario 1, because you've also got to tack on some of those other ones had the 3-tier transportation in them, which also adds cost to it. So I mean, this is where
I would say you pick what you want to do, and you try to see how that works. And if you got to back off it, you got to back off it.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think if we can figure out, how we want to go back, and then look at, can we go straight to that? Do we need to do 2 steps to, number 1, for safety, but number 2, just to make it affordable?
So as the board considers different models within this structure here on reduced staffing, or as previously presented, whatever your pleasure may be, we do now have a tool to talk about costing it out, what the direct levy increase may be for next year. That's only if we needed to continue. That would only be attributable to the staffing increase. And of course, make no mistake about it, we still have our regular staffing salary increases that we have that are based on collective bargaining units. We would still have our healthcare increases. We would still have increases to ERS and TRS. That this document is only the tax levy increase attributable to staffing.
So Brian, can you go back to the model? Yeah. So 140.
Would you like me to be in the reduced staffing tab or the previous?
It doesn't. I was just trying to see why GHI were exactly the same. I thought there was K-5, K-6 general education. So it really, but I thought when we did the K-5, oh, never mind. This doesn't have transportation. Never mind.
Yeah.
Got it now.
Yep. Neither
So
transportation.
you need the
nor
same amount of assistance for K-5 or K-6 or
Say again, John.
He was saying the same
same
amount of
assistance K-6 things.
We're losing you a bit, John.
Yep. How about now?
There it is.
Okay. Do you need the same amount of assistance for K-5, K-6, and K-8?
Let's see, we've determined that for K-5, we need 6 and 2, and 2 are 10. For K-6, we need 10, and for K-8, we need 10. Yes.
Why? How is that so?
Because the biggest, and principals, and Caroline, and anyone, if you want to help me out, that's fine. But the biggest impact here is that K-5, in the K-5 scenario, that's really where we needed to be able to divvy up the classrooms. So if you have one teacher, teacher Mrs. Smith becomes classroom 1 and classroom 2 of Mrs. Smith, and we need to be able to have a teacher assistant going back and forth. So it's really the K-5 program that's mostly impacted.
But so we got 3, 2, but isn't like the second one, K-5 in person, 6 to 12, shouldn't those be the same numbers?
Column G?
Column D and column G. Oh, all right, never mind. So column D is the one with it's basically 6th grade through 12, all being remote all the time.
Right. In the
Column
last-
D,
yeah.
yes.
So Brian, to your point, if you said K4, which is not here, you would drop off a handful of necessary staff members.
Yeah, I think speaking from a building leader stance, you would drop off the extra assistant to split 5th grade. So you take it that way. You know, it's not huge. Each grade, you're going to chip away one assistant K-5.
Okay, so it's only one assistant if you drop the grade.
K-5, I can't speak for secondary.
Okay.
The biggest thing though, Chris, is K-5 versus K-4. If I understood it correctly, and I know it's not in here, but that's where we add the 250K for another bus run.
Well, we could do K-5 with 2 tiers of bus runs. 5th grade would have to travel with the middle school, high school, and they could come in every day. While middle school and high school is AA or BB, if that's what we chose.
So say that again. So K through 5 would all come in together. I mean, they would all be in full time with 2 tiers. They would so the 5th graders would just show up either an hour earlier or an hour later, but they'd still be in full time.
Correct.
They would come in with an hour earlier, approximately an hour earlier, with the secondary students that are hybrid. So the 6 through 12 students that are coming in on that hybrid day, the 5th graders would show up then. And we've spoken preliminarily with Mr. Lipka and the buildings that he shares staff with. And they believe that they're able to make the schedules happen in spite of that because of the way that the special schedules are already structured. So it shouldn't impact like the staffing in terms of the regular teaching staff to have fifth graders come in early.
It was K6 that threw us the 3 tiers. K5, we were still at 2.
Correct.
But if we have the later ones, GHI, those are 3-tier?
K5's not.
HI, they're 3-tiered.
Because now you're bringing in, because that first K5 is with every 6 through 12 in general ed. I mean, remote.
Right.
This has a, so you'd really need, well, it's a 4-day extra run, I guess.
Yeah, it changes when we include more than K5. If we go K6, like you're all saying, that's really the linchpin.
So there's no way an extra bus can be put on to keep the K through 6 all in school on the day. There's no way an extra bus can be run.
Yeah, at a cost. You could put 3 tiers at a cost, 240.
No, that's not to have the 3 tiers. Because it's 3 tier. What does 3 tiers mean? Is that 3 different times the kids are coming into school?
Yes.
So how would that work? How would that, like, what time would school start for all the grades? Like, how did that work?
Well, we have yet to determine how it would work in terms of actual times because we weren't going to create times and schedules for each of 7 scenarios just yet. But the one true thing is that 5th grade would be coming in on a different schedule.
But if we just used hypothetical, so if we said the first with the 3 tiers, the first one comes in at 7, the second one comes in at 8:30, the third one comes in at 10. I mean, we were talking last week, I think we said between an hour and a half to get the kids off, get the bus clean, get it out there, get all those kids and get them back in. So, we're talking, it's 7, 8:30, 10 o'clock, or maybe it's 15 minutes off, it's 7, 8:15 and
9:30.
9:30.
Yeah, and I think that's probably likely.
But but I think what Claudia is asking is, couldn't you add buses or a bus to tier 1 or tier 2, I guess it would be, so that K through 6 would all come in, together on, just make it a bigger tier, I guess. Is that right, Claudia?
No, exactly, Perry. Thank you. And I guess we don't even know how many parents are actually willing to drive their students in. I know that you say you've got to keep the buses on there, but also, I don't know, is it possible to open up the radius of the parents that drive? Like for me, if my kids were still in school, I would have absolutely no problem in taking my kids in every day. Because the kids were able to get the bus. So is it possible to open up that radius just to get help get the 6th graders in? Because then you're going to have less students on that bus.
I think that takes a referendum, though, Claudia. I think we have to actually put it out to our our taxpayers to decide whether or not we should change that piece of our, whatever you want to call it.
Okay,
Right.
all right. But it was just, it's a thought, but also,
Yeah.
have we thought about changing the bus, like bus run 37 or 36? Again, we don't know how many kids are going to be remote. They're going to stay full remote to determine whether we're going to need 3 buses.
Yeah, the challenge about, I'm sorry, were you not done?
No, I'm sorry. I meant to say 3 tiers. I didn't mean to say 3 buses, 3 tiers.
Yeah, the challenge, so we wouldn't be in a scenario that we would only be able to add 1 bus run to figure all that out, because that 1 bus run would have to go throughout the whole school district to get the extra kids. There will be some version of remapping, if you will, of routes. That's going to be able to happen, and that's going to happen, frankly, no matter what different scenario or hybrid we choose to be as efficient as we can. But adding 1 run won't solve our problem, unfortunately.
Well, the benefit of this is if we're not going to I don't think anyway. That's up for a vote. But if we don't start out with the G, H, or I, and we start out with the, the C, we would get to see how many people are driving. We get to see how many people are staying home remote because now they're committed until, say, January. And then you could say, okay, we can move into this model now because we have, the availability. So it's up in the air until that time, I would think, if they can't add buses.
Yeah, and we would just reassess, an ongoing scheduled out reassessment of the status of who's remote, who wants to come in at the end of January, at the end of semester. And you're right, that would just inform our pathway towards whatever goal we're looking for, whether it's a K-8 in person or a K-6 in person, and an AABB for the rest of the students.
So if we're taught, let's stay with column C for a little bit. What happens, and I guess this is to the principals, we can't hire anybody, we can't find anybody. Does that mean we can't open? Or does that mean we've got some, I don't know, we basically have to take high school staff and move them to Elm? What happens if, even without worrying about the money, which we'll get back to, suppose we have, Cheryl puts out these things and we get nothing, or we get one monitor and, what happens?
So are we able to use any large group instructional spaces? Because I feel like that is a big determinant in how we can go forward with limited staff on a daily basis, and also how we can go forward with limited staff on an emergency type basis where, significant number of staff members call out.
Hey, just, I think it's you, Brian. You're on the screen.
Yeah, thanks.
Where you start typing things about me. So I guess that, who's that question to, Caroline, about the large area? I mean,
Anyone?
I
The
can answer
board.
that.
I mean, are we prepared?
I can answer how many could go in each gym.
Yeah, so are we prepared? I think that that's something that it's like a contingent. If we have that availability of space, things may look very differently because you have the ability to have where we're dividing classes, wouldn't need to divide classes, right? We would be able to potentially draw the walls, and it's less classes that we have to divide and make two discrete spaces for. It's less people that we would need to, even in the hybrid model, utilize extra staff for. So it's just something we would need to know. Like if we're asking, we can't hire people. Okay, well, can we use those
Well,
spaces?
This is more not in the event, that we turn around and say, we don't have the money, forget it. This is more like, suppose we can't find them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think, all the pictures that I see of these large educational spaces, they all have like plexiglass walls in between classrooms and some sort of noise deadening somethings. I mean, that when I said, are we prepared? Could we do that? Like, if it, let's say we go to the third week of October and we have nobody, or we have one person we found. Is this something that we could turn around quickly and say, all right, we have to put these 4 classes. We've got teachers that can teach these split up classrooms for these 5. And then the rest of them have to go in the I don't know, the room at Alden. Can we, and then, once we get another teacher's aide, we can, take a full class out of there and split them across classrooms. I mean, do we have the ability to create that sort of transitional plan instead of, a hard November 2nd, everybody's back, or November 2nd, nobody's back?
Yeah, I think Mike wants to comment on some things that he's researched.
Yeah, and I think Elliot can be good with this piece too.
Go ahead, Mike.
So at Elm in the gym, to repurpose it, there's some rules from SED about fire lanes on the sides of the room and everything. And then the social distancing, it's 6 foot from the center of the desk to the back of the chair in front. And it's 6 foot shoulder to shoulder, side to side, not center to center. It's 6 foot shoulder to shoulder. That's how we did all the classrooms.
Right.
So at the gym, at the all-purpose room at Elm, you can only fit 20 desks because that's a small one. At Alden, you can fit 40. And you have a curtain in the middle if you wanted to do 20 and 20 facing the opposite ways. But I don't know if a curtain's going to separate the room well enough. Oh, no, Alden, you can't because all the fire alarms are on one side of the room. So Alden will have to be one big room with 40 students. The middle school has fire alarms on both, has everything it needs on both sides of the room. It also has a folding wall. And in each side, you could put 25 desks. So you'd have 50 kids in the middle school gym. You could either have them all in one big class space in one way, or you could close the divider and face them both ways and have 2 different classes in there, 25 in each. The high school, I didn't get to finish today. I got some of the numbers, but I didn't measure the desks out. I'll have that tomorrow morning.
But we're talking about putting multiple classes, let's stay with the little ones because they're easier for me to get my head around. If you've got 3 fifth grades, are we then talking about taking the entire 5th grade, putting it in there and teaching it as one giant class? Or are we talking about somehow dividing those rooms up where either you've got a big one for like, one of the big, like I'd say a 20-person 5th grade class, and then how do you keep the sound separated? I think the bigger issues are like logistically, how does it work? Because these teachers are going to be teaching remote at the same time. I mean, they're going to be in school, but teaching out, and they're going to be yelling to get the kids' attention on the microphone. Maybe not yelling, but speaking loudly. So that's why I was asking the question: can we do a transition, or is it's a nice thought and we've got the space, but logistically we can't do it?
I think, like, speaking of Alden's situation, it doesn't create more space in our staffing. We're still going to need those people. It's not a direct, all right, so we split 5 classrooms, now we have 10 rooms. We can't then go to just 6 rooms with one big one. It's you're still in the same boat.
Right. So if we don't get the people, what do we do?
What you can use it for, I think, in the secondary level is perhaps, like lunch in a big space, and that'll limit some of the other bodies that you need. I don't want to speak to Steve, but I think that's it right there. He probably doesn't even need to.
Okay. Jen, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just for clarification on the grid that Brian put up. So say Elm, because of course that's all I can wrap my head around. There were like 2 AM bus supervisors, and then there's a monitor. What does the AM bus supervisor do? And like, could they also be is it the person that just takes the temperature, and could they also be the monitor? Or am I completely off base?
Well, that's a stipend. That's not actually a person.
Oh, okay.
Right.
But you correct, and you are correct. That is what their job is. They'll be taking those temperatures of students.
So that's somebody that's already on staff. That's what they're going to do. Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, the job was already there for 1 person. We just have to up it to 3 because of the temperature taking.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Okay. Huh. So just Brian, back to round numbers. If we went AA, BB from now, or from November 1st through the end of the year, can you just throw that in here? So what's that? 6 months?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes, I can. And are you saying as we previously presented, or with the reduced staffing model?
Just do as you previously presented, because we that's what we approved, I think.
Okay, so we have November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June. That would be 8 months.
So really, our bare minimum for the rest of this year is $711,000 that we have to find.
Yes.
Right. Now, one thing I didn't see, we'll come back to this. We talked about cafeteria workers being bumped up.
Not an implication for the general fund. We're only talking about the general fund because the cafeteria is self-sustaining, in theory. So that would not come to bear unless we needed to come back to the board for an inter-fund transfer, because we didn't get to where we needed to be.
All right. So then if you take that 8 months out of there.
Yep.
And we went, say, so we do November, December, January, say we do February. So you got 3 months that say that, and then pick a, number 3 there, like, what is number 3? 1, 2, 3. Try column G. So what is that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Number 5.
So we went 3 and then 5, and then what do we say? 5 months.
5 months.
So we have to come up with a 2-stage thing. We'd have to come up with around $1 million.
And again, with the amount that we have in our unreserved fund balance, coupled with the amount that we have, to John's point, in our accrued liabilities, the 1-year issue is it's tough. It's $1 million. We're going to take a hit, but the first year is going to be less of an issue, as the challenge is whatever we give now, and I say give, whatever we create for our kids, if there's going to be a feeling of a reduction in services next year, that's going to be challenging, right? So it's going to feel like we're going to have to continue with whatever it is that we choose. So
so then you have $1.1 million, and then plus 250 grand for a third tier for 5 months. Well, 250 was for a full year, right?
243 for a full year, exactly.
So 243. So if we say we'd only need it for 5 months, whatever that is. So I'll say half of it. So we need about another 125 grand, 140 grand. So you'd be about $1.3 million added to the cost.
Yeah, and there'll be an offset there too, because now we'll be in September, October. We'll have 2 months of only paying for a certain number of runs and a certain percentage of other runs. So there'll be some breakage there, but not what you would completely need it to be.
Okay.
Brian, I know it's not on here again, and I don't want to keep talking off menu, but if we came right out of the gate K2, just to bring back the little ones, would it have a huge impact on the first category? I don't know if it's a really easy way to look at it. I mean, I know they're going to probably need the most in Elm, but
if we went K2, Mike, I'll need your help on this. If we went K2 fully in, we would be somewhere in.
Well, and I
Let's
think
look at the
arena.
rows that pertain to Elm.
Right.
Yeah, so are you just asking like specific staffing? If we just did Elm and we did straight out the gate K2, we would need it's the teaching assistants that drive it. We're at 2201. We would have to then hire, the only missing piece is the 7 teaching assistants.
Yeah. So I guess,
so
Chris,
that
you could
would
look
be-
at it as the delta between this 523 and the 145.
but you wouldn't need 7, 'cause that's K through 5.
7 is just for K2.
Oh, it is?
That-
Okay.
And then
Well,
there's an additional 6 from Thompson.
Right.
Yeah, it's just at Elm. So you're right. You just do that subtraction and you're looking at,
Approximately 400 grand.
Okay.
So,
But on an annual basis,
right.
let's not forget,
Well-
so not on a prorated basis.
I
mean,
mean, like 400 grand. Right, on an annual basis, it's only 3 months, so because we're already saying they're gonna be income, say, January. So it's only an additional 3 months of, say, 400,000 or whatever it would be.
Yeah,
No,
and
guys-
just be careful. I mean, we're not saying anybody's in,
right?
in any structure right now. I mean, the discussion is, could we do like a K to 2? You're basically everybody else is AABB, so you're adding those 7 people plus, whatever, a little bit, but you're still, I mean, there's the possibility that could go through year end. We could do K-12 AABB through year end.
So we talked about that today and just what are those possibilities considering all the staff hires that need to occur. And so we combine that with our thought that, if we do want to get some students in, what's the least that we can go into without the staffing implication. So we came up with sort of a staged plan to go in different phases, just as a draft to kind of brainstorm around. If anyone wants to see it.
Yeah. I mean, put it up.
Yeah, Elliot, can you go to that slide 6?
I sure can.
Thank you. Sir. And Mike, if you want to talk us through it, that'd be great.
Sure.
Hang on 1 second. It's coming up right now.
So, of course, we're open to all discussions, but our thought process was, all right, that first model of K-12 AARBB, that is the one that we can put in place with the least amount of staffing hires needed. So how would we do that? And even with that, our thought was, based on what we've seen kind of all around, it's not the best to just dump all the students K-12 in it on that Monday. We'd sort of gradually roll into this AARBB situation. And we would do it by focusing on just the transition grades for that first week. So our new kindergarten students would come in, our 3rd graders would come in, our 6th graders, our 9th graders. To piggyback on that and stay within that same week for support, we didn't want kindergarten students riding a bus alone. We said, let's bring in the 1st graders with them, kind of like as their buddies, to show them what's going on, show them around school, their first time there. We use that same idea with the 9th graders. Rick up at the high school has Link Crew, which some of you are familiar with, and the seniors are really the ones that help the freshmen come in. It's not the sophomores. And if you have 2 teenagers, that it's much probably better to have an 18-year-old and a freshman than it is to have, two kids right around the same age. So we took that idea of the 12th graders plus their seniors, let's get them back in the building, working with our freshmen. So if you see here in week 1, we would take that week and those grades specified there would do AA, BB on the split that we figure out. And providing that week went well with half of them coming in AA, the other half coming in BB, we would then, one of the options is bring in the other grades. Depending on how slow we wanted to take this, we could, in the 2nd week, just bring in those other grades. And those folks, those children who stayed home the first week, who went in the first week, would stay home, thus giving grade 2 their own time to reacclimate. Grade 4 and 5, their own time without 3rd in. Same with 7 and 8, same with 10 and 11.
So Mike,
Yeah.
who's being, are they all being taught? They're just not there?
Yeah. Yep. So once we start whatever this is, it's synchronous. So it does present that challenge to the teacher that we are all cognizant of. If I'm a 10th grade English teacher and I'm in period 5, I have, you know, my socially distanced half students here, and then I have my remote here. But yes, so I teach continuously from Monday through Friday. You know, there's no repeat lessons. I go. What's in front of me is what changes. That's also a great model for a student who may have to be home for a multitude of reasons, whether they get sick or not, they don't miss out. Same thing with a staff member. So yeah, it's continuous education.
Do we know, Caroline, do we know how many, like, because the one thing I can hear sort of bubbling on the in the audience right now is I've got a first grader and a sixth grader and a, you know, and a fourth grader, and they're going to go, you know, one's going to get on the bus, and the next week the other one's on the bus, and there's no continuity. Have we looked at, like, say, first, I don't know, first, second, fourth, like look at the split and see how much trouble we would have with siblings being split across, you know, they're either in or they're out.
Perry, are you saying these 2 weeks it's too much for 2 weeks, or you're not thinking full-time, right? You're not thinking normal?
No, I'm just thinking, you know, the parents have been, you know, it's been tough on the parents because it's just, you know, the kids are home or they're at daycare, but now it might end up having another level of confusion for the first couple weeks. You know, we're just getting them rolling. I don't know. I'm just curious if we've taken a look at it.
We spoke about that. We didn't look specifically at which of the families and what combinations of families, because every family may have a different combination of grade levels that we have to consider as well. But what we wanted to do is make decisions that were going to be developmentally best for our students K-12.
Okay.
And we believe that, well, we know lots of research shows that transitions are the most difficult times for students. So we really targeted the transition grades to have them have the opportunity to make that transition into their new buildings. Additionally, we talked about the fact that kindergartners on the bus by themselves would probably not be good for anybody. So that's why we decided that the first graders should accompany them because they've already been through it, right? They're very close in age. They likely, you know, would know some of each other from the community and from other outside activity. So we thought that that was the best way to usher in the kindergarten. Third graders will also be on those buses, but the third graders will go to Alden. So we just felt like a friendly face.
Okay.
Ushering them into Elm was a good idea.
Okay.
We also talked about that secondary week there. Do we want to isolate 2, 4, 5, 7, 8, 10, 11? Or are we that confident that, hey, in week 2, those new grades come in, but the week 1 kids also stay in? And so, you know, it takes 2 weeks to get all students in as opposed to gradually going 3. You know, if we want to err on the side of caution, make sure everything's up and running, you know, and test it with kind of 2 halves first, then we would go with the 3 weeks. If we feel very confident in everything we're doing, we get them all in that second week. So you don't need that 3rd week.
I mean, I could see this, the one that's on the screen, giving us an extra couple weeks to hire folks, where you don't, you know, the first week you got basically half the kids are in, the second week half the kids are in. You know, it would give you some buffer of maybe I only got 3 instead of 7. Because we still have all the anybody that chooses to keep their children remote, right?
Mhm. Right.
Yes, that's a factor. And keep in mind when you're looking at this is not representative of any all in. So you actually don't need 7 teaching assistants at Elm and 6 at Alden. This is just AABB. What this does do is get us in, get everyone used to it, test all the things that we put in place to mitigate the spread of COVID. And then, like you said, you know, buy us time. You know, does that mean that 4 weeks in, we're going to try to do K2 because we've hired these people? You know, We don't know, but this is at least getting students back in the buildings.
Yeah. Okay.
I wouldn't think it would drastically reduce the staff though. If say Elm, you're bringing in K1, you're really just missing one grade. So, I mean, it is a little bit less, but I'm just afraid of the confusion and just, more of the parents out there trying to figure it all out. But I understand the orientation part of it.
So how many of these did you guys go through? Different options.
Even beyond the 7?
Well, like the one you just showed, how to, it's still an AABB model. It's just how quickly do you have all the AAs and all the BBs in? So did you guys look at other, half days, like half the school comes in, and please, don't take any of this like I'm asking you to do it.
And we did. We talked about AB to try and speed up in terms of how quickly we built to everybody being in, instead of doing AA and then at the end of the week BB. We did look at doing cohort A, then cohort B, back-to-back days alternating. What we found with that is that was going to send parents into a whole other pattern of scheduling, and we wanted, as we transition, we at least wanted to keep consistent with the schedule that was going to be long-term for however long that term is before if and when we decided to move to something else with more persons in attendance. But we thought it was in the best interest of everyone so that people didn't have to switch daycare routines again and then switch in the following week or two. So we just, after discussing quite a few options, talked about this particular one being the most consistent with the longer term plan. So that's why we felt it was the most appropriate, even though we would like to get them back sooner than the full 2 weeks or 3 weeks if we don't stack them the way that Mike was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, and I feel like it's just slow and steady. It's methodical, it's strategic, intentional, and purposeful. Everything is going to be learning for the adults in the building and in the district, and for the children. The minute they get off the bus, it's going to be very different. So just taking our time, adjusting protocols and procedures along the way, identifying staff deficiencies or redundancy. It just allows us to take care of our kids too, socially and emotionally. This is going to be very difficult for them. We haven't seen them in quite a long time. They haven't seen their friends in quite a long time. So I think it's wise to just whatever hybrid that we have, a mini hybrid within as we bring in our students over time.
Well, I got to believe too, how when kindergartners come in, they want to go home and see mommy, and then suddenly they don't feel well. Well, that used to be an interesting, oh, well, you'll feel better in a few minutes. Now it's, do they have COVID? It's this whole thing with handling illnesses and it makes all of this, and maybe it is easier to handle half the kids, when to get them through that hump of, please don't come down here and say you think you have a fever. That would be a bad thing to say, even if it does get you home quickly.
Yeah, I think we want to go slow on the opening because we just don't want to overwhelm staff and cause a big problem here. It's
exhausting for everybody.
Yeah.
Well, and I think it really does come back to how feasible is it to staff to these levels in any 6 months, 3 months, a month. You almost have to wrap the starting population around the number of employees you can actually bring in.
I also think there's a really important component to think about here when we do bring students back, is that we've seen it at the middle school in our small population that we've had in, is that while it is in-person instruction, and while many of the entry and exit protocols are going to be different, I think, and I want to be clear to understand that even the in-person instruction is going to look very different. Many of our students are so accustomed in the last 2 to 3 years on working in small groups with their classmates, working in little small conference tables and having different roles. It's going to look very different than that as well. I mean, our students are now going to have a mask on all day. They're going to be at their own individual desk. And while they will be collaborating using the technology that thank goodness we have, just the general protocols that were even a shift for us before to do more student to student interaction and student to student work, it's going to look very different there as well. So I think it is really important and really wise, and I've heard that from a few different board members, to move kind of at a pace where we're making sure that we're doing things to get it right and not necessarily be right in the short term.
No, I mean, it's going to be very strange, you know, when even the little ones, when they come in and their teacher's not in the room with them, somebody else is, and that teacher is not just teaching them, but they're teaching the room next door and the kids that are home. It's going to be a very bizarre situation. Okay. All right, so do we have any more questions from the board on the financial aspects of this? I assume you guys will send these out. And again, by Thursday, please send out the list of whatever you want to call it, questions and issues and the answers that we think have already been given, the situations that have already been resolved. So does anybody else have any other questions or concerns before we torture Elliot about why he can't keep BOCES running? Sorry, Elliot.
I'd like to add, I like the spreadsheet. Thank you, Brian. I would like to see the transportation folded into yet a super number. I'd like to see the transportation for the different plans. And what's the other thing? Oh, also probably when you're talking about budget for next year or how it affects the budget, I think we gotta probably see, I don't know what the number is, but we need like a fudge factor where we know a budget typically grows by, I don't know what it is, 2% naturally. We just need that additive in there so we don't fool ourselves into thinking, oh, the budget will only have this kind of impact. There will be more impact than just what we're showing. I think we need to just be able to see it, I think.
Yeah, so when you say transportation for each plan, it would be the normal budgeted transportation for every plan with the exception of the ones that we needed a third tier. And that was that $243,000 add.
Then the
So
added should be added in, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
For the ones that actually need it, right?
Yeah,
I mean, not
plans
all.
that need the third tier.
Yeah.
Yep. So that would probably be good. The other thing too, Brian, is if you could send us the reserves, just so I have it, I can find it easy. That would be nice.
Sure.
Thank you.
And then just a clarifying question, John.
Yep.
So I want to get you information about next year, like you asked. But in order for me to drill down, so there's so many, do you want me to just give you an approximate?
Well, we had a long-term financial plan.
Assumptions?
We had a long-term financial plan in which we had some guesstimates there, so.
Yeah, and we could use that. The challenge is that long-term financial plan wouldn't have the specifics in there with regard to revenue, like a 20% revenue cut on the revenue side. It wouldn't have the specifics of ERS increasing and TRS increasing, and we only have the ERS number right now. It's going to go up, I think, to 14.6% from I wanted to say that was 11.9, but I'm not positive. So that's going to be going up, but we don't even have the TRS information yet.
Yeah.
We didn't finish negotiating with MTA, so we don't know what that's going to look like.
Right.
And so I'm happy to provide whatever it is you'd like, but what assumptions would you like me, or do you want me to just let you know what assumptions I've made?
Then just, well, leave a, I guess I have to think about this a little more.
Okay.
Top of my
I mean,
head.
for me, I mean, what John is asking for is, we don't want to see, well, there's a 6% budget increase and it's all because of this.
Right.
You know, to understand, like, normally our budget goes up 0.9% or whatever, it goes up 2.1% every year, you know, or it's somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5. Well, now it's going to go up between 3.5 and 5.0. Because, and then we can sort of understand that really it's not 5% because of this. It's really, you know, 2% because of this. Something that just gives us like a normalized, you know, in a normal year, here's what it would look like between X.
I mean, you could take an average of the past 6 years. I mean, there's different things you can do.
Okay. Just so I think we have a few questions. Cheryl, do we have any questions?
We do.
All right,
We have 8 of them.
go ahead.
Let's see. So our first question is from Doris Severa. If a child on a bus presents with a fever, we know the process with them. What happens with the other riders of said bus? Forgive me if this was already covered. Does the contact tracing come into place?
I want to say that it's dependent whether there is a positive COVID test, and then the contact tracing would come into play. And we also have planned that in a future work session that we would have certain scenarios and speak about them specifically.
Yeah, so what we asked as a board, you know, and it doesn't really have to be done before the, you know, our decision on a model is concerned, is take us through a scenario or 3 scenarios. Take us through a kid gets sick in a classroom. What happens? You know, what's the nurse do? Where do the kids go? You know, when do we contact the health department? What happens to the child? You know, how long will they be in the quarantine room before, you know, and does the nurse go in there, and then are we short a nurse? Something that can take us through all those. And I apologize, I don't remember who asked that question, but it's something that can take us through all of the people, all of the aspects, all of the nuts and bolts of how to respond to kid gets sick in the classroom. I think it was one of the kids gets sick on a bus, to your question. And the third is more, you know, someone tested positive and they were in our school a few days ago. What do we do?
Yeah.
So that is one of the scenarios that we're going to run through. But anyway, Cheryl?
Okay, so our next one is Michelle Eddington. My question is pertaining to whether or not you would be willing to look at Elm Drive and Alden Place children separately when making your decision. I'm a daycare provider in Millbrook and have been doing this for 20 years. I have a lot of experience in child development growth. During this time with the Chromebook learning, I've had 6 children in my care ranging from kindergarten to 2nd grade. I've seen all of these children become frustrated to the point of tears and weeping. Would it be possible for children to go to school from morning until noon, like as if it was a half a day? Sorry, my screen is moving on me. If it was a half a day, then when they come home, they would be do their specials. This way the children will not have recess and would have less exposure and contact.
I mean, we're, you know, just to put a general answer, I mean, that's exactly what we're looking through with these scenarios.
Right.
I mean, we can't take every possible scenario. We do recognize that, you know, the faster we can get in the K-2 is the transition years. But again, it's a lot more than just childcare and getting the students back. It's financial obligations. It's doable. Is this even physically doable? As a childcare person, you can probably imagine if you had to go out and hire, 8 new childcare workers by the end of the month, in this environment, it's very, very difficult to pull off. Which is why we're going through, and which was why we've used these 2 months, or right now a month, to really hone the model that we're putting forward. I don't know if anybody has anything to add, but Cheryl?
The next is Maggie Meyer. Please consider large group instructional spaces, especially for the high school. I have a 12th and 10th grader. The mental and emotional damage to all 3 of my girls is immense. Why wouldn't we do large instructional spaces? We did touch on that. And then another question from her is, how much money has the school district saved since being shut down since last March? And who from the school is doing the contract tracing?
So in terms of the amount of money that we saved since March, much of it is hard to quantify because it's hard to tell if it was actually attributable to not being here. But what I can share is on the transportation contract, it was probably between $600,000 and $650,000 that remained unspent, and the board approved to go into reserves, and responsibly chose to put it in reserves that would protect the district further, but still gave them the option of being able to use that to offset taxpayer expenses in the future.
And related to the large spaces, I think that was, we spent quite a bit of time talking about that earlier. What was the third? Oh, the contact tracing?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And I'm the COVID coordinator, and I would really be the one that would activate the team. So activate the nurses, administrators, whoever is needed to help with information gathering. But really, the first thing is a call to the Department of Health, and they're the ones who help structure what that contact tracing will look like. And from my understanding, just from other districts, it looks different every time, depending on what they need or who is in contact or the buildings. So we do have some instructions on what needs to be done, but again, it'll look different every time depending on the who, what, where, when, how.
Okay, go ahead, Cheryl.
Don
Time for pretty much one more question.
Yeah, this is it. This is our last one. Don Tompkins, just an FYI, I know the next Board of Ed work session is scheduled for October 1st. However, some people will not be able to attend this, as high school has also has their digital parent night, and this at the same time, which is a conflict for us as parents to attend both meetings.
Yeah, these are all being recorded, so if you can't make them, I'm hoping that the recordings are working fine. All right, guys, as usual, thank you for putting up with this. I mean, oh, go ahead, Jen.
I just had a quick, because one of the questions that, talking about the saving of the money, I think we've heard that before, whether we've heard it, on the street or, and I don't, maybe at another meeting, I don't know if you could do it tonight, but I'm sure that there's the perception that, well, we saved $600,000 last year. Can't we use that to just pay for everything for this year? And I'm sure, I know we touched upon some of the budget. I'm thinking maybe a lot of people out there have that perception or that question. So, and I know it's not as easy as that. Maybe we can just address that. I don't know how, because I know we're kind of over tonight, but.
I mean, the bottom line is that's where things like that are what we're looking to pay the bill.
And Perry, we do have that flexibility. So yes, Jen, you're right. We can use some of those reserves and we ultimately will. However, the board chooses to later on, however we discuss kind of moving the money around, if you will, in a responsible way to make sure that it comes from the correct reserve. We'll do that, and we'll have that discussion in open session. But that's exactly where the money will ultimately come from for this year.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Sure.
All right. All right, everybody. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thanks, John. So the next one will be, you'll get the list of questions and comments and concerns, and we can look through that each between Thursday and the next board meeting. The next one that we have scheduled, I know we've pushed it out like 3 times. We can have some discussion on, if there's anything else people want to know about hybrid. But there's, what was the following, was the session after that, Laura, or like the next session that we had open?
Well, we have a few we have social emotional communication, family and community engagement. Those seemed like the largest ones. And then there are other ones. So I guess the question is, did you want to continue the Board of Ed work sessions as formally as we were doing in the beginning? Because we were really following the NICED guidelines and talking about the mandatory requirements. But I feel like some of them we've already taken care of during these conversations, like technology and connectivity, or absenteeism, or staffing. But there are requirements and considerations within them. So it's how the board wants to continue with them. I felt like in the beginning, we really hit the heavy hitters: food services, facilities, teaching and learning, of course, special education. So it's how do you want to continue?
I mean, I think the most important thing we have in front of us right now is making the decision on November 2nd. What does it look like?
Mm-hmm.
So anything in those list of specs, or whatever you want to call them, that can help us narrow down our choice, make a better decision on that, we should take a look at Thursday.
Okay. We also have a survey that we have results from the latest survey that we can share as well. And then we're also planning visiting Pauling and Rhinebeck to observe their arrivals and other procedures and protocols this week as well. So we'll have some information, sort of boots on the ground information too.
Okay. And then, I don't know where we are on the scenarios, but we do need to schedule some time to go through those.
For the contact tracing?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's more than contact tracing though. I mean, it's what do you do? Suppose the kids' parents won't come pick them up. What happens? There's that whole, the actual physical logistics of it versus, contact tracing is sort of, well, did they, it's almost an exchange of information, but there's a whole bunch of stuff you guys have to do to run people out of the classroom, seal off the classroom, clear it, clean it, all that stuff. So we should have, as soon as possible, take a walk through those scenarios.
I can give you an idea.
Well, it's, I want to know where the nurses are. What happens if the nurse walks in there and the kid, fires a big cough in her face, or he doesn't have a mask on, and, or the nurse had the child in her office and tested positive over the weekend for COVID. What about, where's the nurse go? Where do we get substitutes? I think there's a very, to me, it seems very complicated dance that's going to have to be done here. And it's going to be a different one every time.
Yep, absolutely.
But I'd like to make sure that, we can hear it from the horse's mouth, as they say, that we're ready for it, or that we're we at least have a written down thing that we can follow till it falls apart. All right.
We're ready.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? All right. Peace out. Hey, by the way, Laura, we had a discussion that we used to have a one flake fill. And we were trying to figure out how we could do like zero link Laura, network loss Laura. There's got to be some way of us canceling school on a non-snow day that belongs to you now.
All right, that's everybody's homework for next Thursday.
See you
Bye,
all.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody.
Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
Good night, everybody.